The auction hall of the Celestial Emporium was a cathedral of avarice, its vaulted ceilings shimmering with holographic constellations, each star system tagged with a price. The air hummed with the low-frequency chatter of 100 species, their voices blending into a symphony of greed. Merchant dynasties, some older than human civilization itself, glided between floating datapads and refreshment orbs filled with liquefied exotic matter. Their bodies, crystalline, chitinous, or wreathed in bioluminescent tendrils, were draped in fabrics spun from supernova remnants, each thread a flex of unimaginable wealth. And then there were the humans. Dr. Elias Vance adjusted his collar, the only one in his delegation still wearing a suit. The others had swapped their formal attire for the guild's standard-issue negotiation robes, garish flowing things that billowed like surrender flags. It was a small humiliation, one of many. The Vexthari, the Emporium's reigning merchant lords, had insisted. Tradition, they'd said, with that infuriating multi-limbed shrug. Vance's aide, Lieutenant Mara Chen, leaned in. They're staring again. Of course they are, Vance murmured, not looking up from his datapad. We're the only ones here who still have teeth. A ripple of laughter echoed from the Vexthari enclave. Lord Zykes, their auctioneer, stood atop a levitating dais, his forearms folded in smug repose. His carapace gleamed like polished onyx, each segment etched with glyphs of past conquests. He caught Vance's eye and flicked a mandible in what might have been amusement. Or indigestion. Ah, the Terrans, Zykes announced, his voice amplified to fill the hall. How adorable of you to join us. Tell me, do your people still trade in precious metals? The hall tittered. Vance smiled, thin and practiced. Only when we're feeling nostalgic. Zykes' laugh was a dry rattle. Charming. Well, do try to keep up. Today's catalog is somewhat more complex than your usual. Bartering. The holograms shifted, displaying the auction's centerpiece, a rotating catalog of cosmic anomalies, black holes, neutron star debris, gravitational eddies, all labeled with the same dismissive tag, non-viable assets. Shen frowned. They're selling empty space? Not empty, Vance corrected, zooming in on a particular sector. The coordinates were unremarkable, a patch of darkness labeled the Void, just undervalued. A Vexthari clerk drifted past, her antennae twitching with disdain. Bidding starts soon, primitives. Try not to confuse the currency converter. Vance ignored her, his fingers dancing across the datapad. Gravitational readings flickered on screen, erratic, inconsistent. The Void's mass signatures didn't match natural phenomena. Too precise. Sir, Chen whispered. Are you seeing this? Vance exhaled slowly. Oh, I'm seeing it. Near the dais, Zykes unfurled a ceremonial scroll, actual paper, another flex, and cleared his throat. Lot 47, the Vorian Black Hole Cluster. A generous accretion disk, ripe for energy harvesting. Do I hear 50 trillion credits? The Kasari, a rival merchant clan, raised a tentacle. 60 trillion! 70! Barked a Nixari matriarch, her three heads hissing in unison. The bids climbed, a frenzy of flashing digits and guttural barks. Vance watched, silent, as the galaxy's elite auctioned off the universe like landlords dividing a tenement. Then, Lot 112, the Void. Zykes sighed, as if the mere listing bored him. A quaint anomaly, no detectable resources, no strategic value. A true collector's item for the discerning wastrel, he smirked. Shall we start at 10 billion? 5 billion? A chuckle rippled through the crowd. Vance straightened. 10 billion? The hall froze. Every eye, compound, lidless, or otherwise, swiveled toward him. Zyk's mandibles twitched. I'm sorry, did the human just bid? I did, Vance said, feigning nervousness. Unless that's not allowed? The Vexthari exchanged glances. This was funny to them. Zyk's recovered, oozing condescension. The guild welcomes all bids, no matter how quixotic. He gestured magnanimously. 10 billion to the Terran delegation. Do I hear 15? The silence was deafening. Going once, twice, Zix's grin widened. Sold to the humans. Congratulations, my friends. You now own nothing. The hall erupted in laughter. Vance bowed, playing the fool. Chen's nails dug into her palms. They're mocking us. Vance pocketed the datapad, his smile never wavering. Let them. The laughter of the Vexthari still echoed through the Celestial Emporium's vaulted auction hall, a sound like shattering glass, brittle and cruel. Dr. Elias Vance adjusted his cufflinks, an affectation had adopted precisely because the aliens found it quaint, and ignored the stares burning into his back. Behind him, Lieutenant Chen seethed, her jaw clenched so tight he could hear her teeth grinding. "They think they've swindled us," she muttered. Vance didn't turn. Good. The auctioneer's podium gleamed under the hall's shifting bioluminescent lights, a grotesque sculpture of fused precious metals. Lord Zix, resplendent in his iridescent robes, waved a dismissive hand toward the human delegation as the next lot flickered into existence above the holostage. A binary star system, its twin suns locked in a slow, stately dance. "Now, honored bidders," Zix crooned, his voice slick with condescension, "the Vexthari cluster. Fully surveyed, fully exploited. Mineral rights included, naturally." The Vexthari delegation, clustered near the front like a flock of preening birds, trilled their approval. Their bid rods lit up in unison, a synchronized display of wealth and power. The Vexthari, their rivals, countered immediately, their own rods flashing crimson. The bidding war escalated, numbers spiraling into the trillions. Vance didn't even glance at the display. His gaze was fixed on the datapad in his palm, where gravitational anomaly readings from the void pulsed in erratic, impossible patterns. "Sir," whispered Dr. Terrell. "Ah, Lien," their astrophysicist, her fingers dancing over her own scanner. "These readings, they're not natural. Therese structure in there." Vance's lips twitched. "Define structure, symmetry, echoes, like machinery." Chen leaned in. "You're saying there's something built in there, or was," Lien murmured. "But according to galactic records, the void's been empty since the first expansion. No civilizations ever. No civilization they know of," Vance corrected softly. A fresh wave of laughter rippled through the hall as the Vexthari cluster sold for a sum that could have fed Earth for a century. Zix preened, his four eyes glinting with satisfaction. Then his gaze slid to the humans, lingering like a predator scenting weakness. "Ah, our new members," he purred, gesturing grandly. "So quiet, so modest in their ambitions. Perhaps the next lot will tempt them?" The holostage flickered, resolving into a swirling nebula, its gases glowing a sickly green. Useless, of course, unless one enjoys poisonous radiation. More laughter. Vance let it wash over him, his fingers tapping idly against his datapad. Chen's voice was taut. "They're baiting us. Obviously. So what's the play?" Vance didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched as the nebula sold for a pittance, then the next lot, a rogue planet, its surface scoured by solar winds, went for even less. The catalog was winding down, the junk lots being cleared away. The void was coming up. Zix knew it too. His grin widened as he gestured to the final entry. "And now, esteemed guests, our piece de resistance." The holostage went dark. Then, with a theatrical flourish, it displayed nothing. A perfect, unbroken black. "The void," Zix intoned, savoring the word. "A truly unique investment opportunity. No planets, no resources, not even light, just emptiness." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Shall we start the bidding at, 10 million? The Vexthari tittered. "Perhaps our human friends would like to—" "Ah!" Vance had raised his rod. A single, deliberate click. The display flickered. 10 million Terran delegation. The hall erupted in muffled snickers. Zix's eyes gleamed. 10 million to the humans. Do I hear 15? Vance waited. Let them think he was nervous. Let them see his fingers tremble, just a little, as he adjusted his glasses. Zix leaned forward, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. Going once, twice, Chen's breath hissed between her teeth. Then, just before the gavel fell, Vance raised his rod again. 50,000 Terran delegation. The laughter died. Zix blinked. Aye, 50 million? Vance met his gaze, said nothing. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The Kessari exchanged glances. The Vexthari's amusement curdled into confusion. Zix recovered quickly, his grin returning. 50 million! A bold move! Do I hear 75? Vance didn't move. Zix's voice sharpened. Going once, twice, a Vexthari noble, Lord Krith, Vance recalled, abruptly raised his rod. 70 million? A gasp, then laughter louder this time. Now the game was afoot. Vance let the tension build. Let them think he was out of his depth. Then, the hall went dead quiet. Zix's smile faltered. Krith's frills flushed purple with irritation. He snapped his rod up again. 25 zillion. Vance didn't hesitate. 100 million dillion. 50,000. Chen's hand clamped onto his arm. What are you doing? She hissed. Vance didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on Zix, watching the first flicker of doubt cross the auctioneer's face. Krith hesitated. Then, with a derisive flick of his wrist, he withdrew. Zix's gavel hovered. 150 million? Going once, no one moved. Vance held his breath. The gavel fell. The auction hall's murmurs of amusement hadn't yet faded when the guild's lawyers descended like vultures to a carcass. Their exoskeletal limbs clicked against the polished obsidian floor, their faceted eyes gleaming with the kind of detached amusement reserved for creatures who had never, in 10,000 years of legal precedent, lost a negotiation. A binding contract, Vance had insisted, his voice steady, his fingers tapping the data slate with a rhythm that suggested he was counting something none of them could see. The lead lawyer, a Vexthari whose chitinous plating bore the golden inlays of 1,000 victorious litigations, scrolled through the terms with a derisive flick of his mandibles. All spatial and temporal properties within the designated coordinates, he read aloud, his voice dripping with condescension. How quaint! The humans wished to own nothing was paperwork. Laughter rippled through the assembly. Even the Kessari, usually too proud to indulge in another species' humiliation, let out a series of harmonic chuckles from their vocal sacs. Vance didn't react. He simply waited. Behind him, Lieutenant Mara Krith shifted, her fingers twitching toward the sidearm. She wasn't technically allowed to carry in the Emporium. Elias, she muttered under her breath, tell me you didn't just bankrupt Earth for a patch of dead space. He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on Lord Zix, who was already motioning for the ceremonial transfer of funds, a pittance by galactic standards, a rounding error in the Vexthari's ledgers. Payment confirmed, Zix announced, his voice rich with theatrical pity. He snapped his claws, and a servitor drone floated forward, bearing a holographic deed etched in iridescent script. By the authority of the Celestial Emporium, we hereby grant the Terran Alliance. He paused, savoring the moment. Sole ownership of the void. May your nothingness prosper. The deed shimmered in the air, its ornate calligraphy mocking them. Krith's jaw tightened, but Vance smiled. The void wasn't supposed to do anything. That was the whole point. But the probes told a different story. Dr. Sears Anya Petrov, lead astrophysicist of Vance's hastily assembled void analysis team, stared at the flickering holoscreen in disbelief. The gravitational anomalies weren't random, they were structured. "That's not possible," she whispered. The void wasn't empty, it was hiding something. A pattern emerged in the static, a whisper of radio silence too precise to be natural, like the echo of a machine holding its breath. Petrov's hands flew across the console, isolating the signal. "Get Vance," she ordered. "Now!" Lord Zykes lounged in his opulent chambers, sipping a goblet of liquefied starlight, a delicacy harvested from the core of a dying sun. The human's folly had already become a favored anecdote at court. They actually paid for it. He chuckled to his adjutant, a sleek, silver-scaled creature whose sole purpose was to laugh at his jokes. The adjutant obliged. Their desperation was pitiable. Zykes flicked a claw dismissively. "Let them scrabble over their worthless void. It keeps them from bothering us with their primitive trade proposals." A chime sounded. The adjutant checked the incoming transmission. "My lord, the Vexthari merchant envoy is hailing us. They're inquiring about the void." Zykes' amusement faded. "Why?" "They claim their deep-range sensors detected an energy spike near the coordinates." "Impossible," Zykes snapped. "Therese nothing there." But for the first time in centuries, the Vexthari lord felt the faintest prickle of doubt. The hologram flickered to life, revealing the void's secret. A Dyson swarm. Not just any megastructure, a cloaked one, its energy harvesting nodes frozen in time, their surfaces etched with glyphs no living scholar could decipher. Precursor tech, Petrov breathed. Older than the guild, older than the Vexthari empire. Vance leaned forward, his reflection warping in the hologram's glow. "And we own it." Krith crossed her arms. "You knew. I suspected." Included future discoveries," Vance finished, buried in subsection 47, paragraph 12. The guild's lawyers were too busy laughing to read it. A slow, predatory grin spread across Krith's face. "So when the Vexthari realize what's actually in the void, TPRC they'll try to take it back," Vance said. "But the law is on our side, for once." Outside, the first human-built probe breached the void's outer boundary. Its transmission, when it returned, would change everything. The probe's transmission arrived in fragments, each burst of data more impossible than the last. Dr. Elias Vance stood in the dim glow of the void analysis room, fingers hovering over the holodisplay as the first images resolved. Around him, his team, 50, Krith, 10, and the others, leaned in, their breaths shallow, their eyes wide. The room smelled of ozone and stale coffee, the air thick with the hum of overworked machinery. "That's not empty space," 50 murmured. Vance didn't answer. He couldn't. The void wasn't a void at all. It was a graveyard of gods. The probe scans revealed a latticework of structures, each the size of a planet, arranged in a perfect spherical formation. They were dormant, their surfaces etched with patterns that made no sense to human eyes, fractal spirals that seemed to twist into themselves, geometries that hurt to look at. Energy signatures flickered in erratic bursts, as if the entire system was trapped in the last microseconds before shutdown. "Precursor tech," 10 whispered. "This is older than the Vexthari." Older than the guild. Krith's claws tapped a staccato rhythm against the console. "And we own it." Vance exhaled slowly. The contract's language echoed in his mind. all spatial and temporal properties within the designated coordinates. The guild had laughed when he insisted on that clause. They hadn't understood. Now they would. 3 sectors away, aboard the Celestial Emporium, Lord Zix of the Vexthari sipped from a goblet of liquefied starlight, his mandibles twitching in amusement. The humans' purchase of the void was the talk of the auction house, a joke, a blunder, a testament to their primitive grasp of value. They actually paid for nothing, he chuckled to his adjutant. Then the Kasari merchant clan's transmission arrived. Zix, the Kasari envoy hissed, her frills flaring in agitation. Your void is emitting anomalous readings, gravitational distortions, temporal echoes. What did you sell them? Zix's amusement curdled. Impossible. The void is worthless. Then explain this. The humans hadn't bought nothing. They'd bought everything. The Kasari moved first. A sleek, predatory scout ship slipped past the void's boundary, its cloaking systems cutting edge, its crew confident. They didn't expect resistance. Why would they? The humans were infants in the dark, fumbling with toys they didn't understand. Then the void woke up. The scout ship's sensors screamed as the nearest Dyson node pulsed. Once, twice, and the ship's system stuttered. Engines failed. Life support flickered. For 3 heartbeats, the crew floated in perfect silence, their ship dead in the water. Then the human drones arrived. This sector is private property. Leave or face penalties under Galactic Commerce Guild Statute 47B. The Kesari captain snarled, but she retreated. The Commerce Guild's arbitration chamber was a cavern of cold light and colder politics. Vance stood at the center, his posture relaxed, his voice calm. Around him, the guild's representatives, Vexthari, Kasari, a dozen others, leaned forward, their expressions ranging from suspicion to outright fury. You hid the void's value, Lord Zix accused, his carapace vibrating with rage. Vance smiled. No, you just didn't read the fine print. The guild's head arbitrator, a skeletal being with too many joints, tapped a bony finger against the table. The contract is binding. The humans own the void and all discoveries within it. Zyke's mandibles clicked, then well buy it back. Vance's smile didn't waver. Not for sale. The chamber erupted. Back in the void analysis room, the probes delved deeper. New transmissions arrived. Fragments of code, whispers of energy, the ghostly echo of a civilization that had mastered the stars before the Vexthar had crawled from their primordial seas. They're not just dormant, 50 said, her voice hushed. They're waiting. Vance watched the data scroll past, his mind racing. The Dyson swarm was a treasure beyond reckoning, a weapon, a power source, a key, and the galaxy was starting to notice. Outside, the first Vexthari warships gathered at the void's edge. Vance didn't flinch. He had the law on his side, and soon he'd have the power too. The Vexthari warships hung at the void's edge like vultures circling a dying beast, their sleek obsidian hulls glinting with the cold arrogance of a species that had never been told no. Inside the command deck of the lead vessel, Lord Zix paced, his 4-spindled limbs twitching with barely contained fury. They're hiding something, he hissed to his adjutant, a wiry Vexthari whose antennae quivered with nervous energy. No species pays that much for nothing. On the surface of a nearby monitoring station, Dr. 2. Elias Vance watched the Vexthari fleet through a bank of flickering holograms, his fingers steepled under his chin. 50 leaned over his shoulder, her dark eyes reflecting the tactical readouts. They're getting impatient, she murmured. Vance exhaled, slow and deliberate. Good. Zix's first mistake was sending in the infiltrators, a team of Vexthari saboteurs, cloaked in stealth fields that bent light like liquid glass, slipped past the void's perimeter. They moved with the confidence of thieves who had stolen from 1,000 systems until the drones found them. Human surveillance tech, reverse engineered from the Dyson swarm's dormant nodes, painted the saboteurs and thermal signatures so vivid they might as well have been screaming. The footage was hilarious. Vexthari commandos flailing in zero-G, their stealth failing as human countermeasures turned their own tech against them. One of them even triggered a containment field by accident, trapping his entire squad in a shimmering bubble of their own incompetence. Vance made sure the galaxy saw it. The leak hit the galactic networks like a supernova. Within hours, the footage spread across 1,000 systems, set to jaunty Terran music, an old Earth tune called Yakety Sax. The Vexthari, masters of commerce and war, reduced to slapstick. Zig's face, when he saw it, was a masterpiece of purple rage. The Vexthari were the first to pounce. A breach of contract, their emissary declared in the guild's grand chamber, her voice ringing with mock outrage. The Vexthari attempted to steal what they legally sold. The chamber erupted. Merchant dynasties who had suffered under Vexthari price-fixing for centuries seized the opportunity. Audits were demanded, contracts were scrutinized, and Vance played the gracious victor. He appeared on every major galactic broadcast, his demeanor calm, his words precise. "We simply wish to develop our property in peace," he said, smiling as the guild's lawyers squirmed. "Though we do appreciate the Vexthari's enthusiasm for our investment." The media loved him. The guild's emergency session lasted 17 hours. When the verdict came, it was delivered by a harried-looking Jixian magistrate, his carapace dull with exhaustion. "The humans' claim is valid. The void is theirs." Zig's mandibles clicked in fury. "Then we buy it back." The offer was staggering, 1,000 times the original price. Enough energy credits to power Earth for a millennium, enough prestige to make humanity a guild heavyweight overnight. Vance listened politely, then he declined. "We prefer to develop the property ourselves," he said, and the way his lips curled at the edges made Zig's blood run cold. The final humiliation was the tour. Vance invited the galaxy's elite, merchant lords, scientists, even a few curious warlords to witness the void's potential. The delegation arrived in a flotilla of luxury shuttles, their occupants murmuring as they drifted toward the coordinates. Then the humans activated the first node. Light unfolded from the darkness. A single Dyson unit, dormant for eons, flared to life, a vast geometric lattice of energy collectors humming with power. The guests gasped. The Vexthari merchant prince dropped his drink. Zykes understood. This wasn't just a power source. It was a weapon, a lever, a way to rewrite the galaxy's balance of power, and the humans had tricked him into handing it to them. Vance turned to the crowd, his smile serene. "As you can see, we've only just begun." The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound he had ever heard. Back on the Vexthari flagship, Zyke stared at the hologram of the activated node, his mind racing. His adjutant dared to speak. "What do we do now?" Zyke's answer was a whisper. And for the first time in his long, illustrious career, the great Lord Zix felt the icy grip of fear. Because the humans weren't just players in the game, they were changing the rules. The void hummed. Not with the chaotic, untamed energy of a black hole or the violent scream of a neutron star, but with the quiet, purposeful thrum of machinery waking from a million-year slumber. Inside the command hub of the Void's Whisperer, Earth's first deep space research station, Dr. Elias Vance watched the readouts flicker to life. The holographic display before him painted the sector in shimmering gold, each node of the Dyson swarm activating in sequence like fireflies blinking awake in a dark forest. Power output at 12%, 34%, 67%, the voice of 10, his lead engineer, was steady, but Vance could hear the awe beneath it. "We're looking at enough energy to power 1,000 Earths," 10 murmured. Indefinitely, Vance allowed himself a small private smile, and they called it a junk lot. Across the galaxy, the Vexthari were scrambling. Lord Zyke's chambers were no longer a sanctuary of opulence. The walls, once adorned with trophies of conquest and trade, now displayed only the frantic glow of emergency reports. His adjutant, 50, stood rigid, their usually impeccable carapace dull with stress. "The humans have activated the swarm," 50 said. "Initial scans suggest—" "I know what the scans suggest." Zyke's voice was a blade, sharp and brittle. Sharp and brittle. He whirled, his robes, woven from the silk of enslaved nebulae, flaring like the wings of a cornered predator. "They're harvesting energy at a rate that dwarfs our entire consortium, and we sold it to them." 50 hesitated. "Teresmore, the Kesari have filed a formal grievance with the guild. They're demanding an investigation into the auction's validity." Zyke's mandibles twitched. The Kesari had always been vultures, circling for weakness. Now, with the Vexthari's reputation in tatters, they smelled blood. And the guild? "They've postponed our request for an emergency session, a death knell." The guild's silence was as damning as a verdict. Zix turned to the viewport, where the triple suns of Vexthari burned, indifferent. "We underestimated them," he admitted, the words ash in his mouth. "We thought they were buying nothing, but they weren't purchasing space." He exhaled. "They were purchasing time." Technicians darted between consoles, their voices overlapping in a symphony of triumph. Vance ignored them, his focus locked on the central display. The Dyson swarm was fully operational now, its energy output stabilizing at 98.7% efficiency. "We've done it," 10 breathed. "We've just become the richest species in the galaxy." Vance shook his head. "Not the richest." He tapped the display, zooming in on a sector of the swarm where the energy signatures pulsed irregularly. "The most powerful." The difference was critical. The Vexthari had wealth, fleets, trade routes, entire star systems under their thumb. But wealth could be seized. Power was leverage. "Open a channel to Earth," Vance ordered. Priority 1. The screen flickered, resolving into the weary but alert face of Earth's Prime Minister. Behind her, the United Planetary Defense Council stood in various states of disbelief. "Dr. Vance," the Prime Minister said. "I trust you have good news?" Vance inclined his head. "The void is ours, fully operational. We're transmitting the energy protocols now." A murmur rippled through the council. One of them, General Okafor, leaned forward. "And the Vexthari?" "Watching," Vance said. "Mino," Vance said, and realizing, far too late, that they auctioned off the keys to the universe. Three standard cycles later, the Galactic Commerce Guild convened an emergency summit. The chamber, usually a glittering showcase of alien opulence, was tense. Representatives from every major faction lined the tiers, their gazes locked on the lone human delegate at the center. Elias Vance stood calmly, his hands folded behind his back. "The Guild recognizes the Terran Republic," the presiding arbiter intoned. Vance nodded. "Thank you. It'll be brief." He tapped his wristpad and the chamber's holographic array lit up with the schematics of the Dyson swarm. "As of today, humanity controls the single largest energy reserve in known space. We did not steal it. We did not conquer it. We purchased it fairly and under guild law." A ripple of unease. The Kesari delegation hissed. "However," Vance continued, "we are not greedy. We propose a partnership. Access to the void's energy in exchange for equitable trade agreements and a reconsideration of certain guild policies." The arbiter's antennae twitched. "Which policies?" Vance smiled. "The ones that allowed the Vexthari to monopolize interstellar commerce for the last 6 millennia." The chamber erupted. 10 joined Vance at the observation deck, where the activated swarm glittered like a constellation of stolen stars. "Think they'll take the deal?" 10 asked. Vance watched the light play across his hands. "Doesn't matter. We've already won." And he was right. Because, for the first time in galactic history, The rules had changed, and humanity had written them.